Hi guys, welcome to the IMSK workshop series. Hope everyone is doing well and safe. As we are conducting this series of workshop and talks for a while, thanks for keeping supporting us. Like we got a good response for the last Unreal Fundamental workshop, and I hope this workshop will help you as well. Today we have here Mr. Aniruddha from Unity. Like Aniruddha here have 17 years of professional experience across industries, and like great to have you here, Aniruddha. Welcome to IMSK.
Thanks, Roy. Yes, so hi, good morning, everybody. Before we start, I just have a couple of requests, if you will. Number one is that this is, we are calling this a talk, but this is more of a discussion. Okay. So that means if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we can address them towards the end of the session. If you want to, bring some points up or something, feel free to do that. Generally, this is a presentation or a talk that I do with a live audience. So it's a little bit more interactive in that scenario. But right now, due to COVID and due to this being a virtual meeting, we are not going to be able to interact as freely as we would have liked. The name of this talk is Approaching Visual Art for Games. And what this is about and why I'm going to talk about this is it's something we'll address now. So approaching visual art for games. So I just want to put some clarification here. This is not a talk or this is not a discussion about making art, or rather this is not an art tutorial, right? I'm not going to start something like Photoshop or something like 3D Studio Max or Blender and start modeling or start painting or texturing. Or I'm not going to start giving you tips about how to animate. I'm not going to give you tips about 3D modeling or anything like that. Okay. This is more of a discussion about our approach towards visual art, and that too in the context of games. So what we are trying to achieve through this talk is a better understanding of why visual art is important to games, what it does, and how we should approach it. Right? What are the rules of art in something like a video game, and what are our responsibilities towards it, right? So even if the talk says approaching visual art for games, this is not strictly a talk for artists. This is not strictly a talk for non-artists also. This is a talk for everybody who is a part of the game creation process and who has to who has played games, who's seen games, who's talking about games, who's writing about games, who's writing for games, who's programming for games, and all sorts of people. This is just me trying to give a little bit more insight about why visual art is an important aspect of video games and how it at such how it should be treated. So a little bit about me. My name is Aniruddha Hardikar. I'm from Pune in India. Right now, I am the solutions engineer for the Asia Pacific region in Unity Technologies. I'm one of the solutions engineering team. My area of operation is largely the Indian subcontinent and of course India. I've been doing this for about 2 years now with Unity. So for anybody who's confused by this, yes, that basically means I work at Unity, right? Prior to that, I have been a 3D generalist or general artist, illustrator, game designer, and graphic artist. I've worked across multiple industries like game development, animation, VFX, filmmaking, advertising, and like many other small things as a freelancer as well. I'm a programmer of questionable skill. That means my programs work, but just don't ask me how. I'm good enough to create bad programs is what I generally like to say. And I've been doing all of this for about 17 years since about 2004, 2003. And so this is, largely because of me being more interested in video games and being a gamer from a very, very young age. So as soon as I got my first handheld game, or as soon as I got my first computer, I knew for a fact that eventually down the line in my life, my career was going to be in video games. And so as such, all of the things that I've been doing have largely been in part because of my interest and my passion for games, right? So at the end of the session, if you have any questions, they don't necessarily need to be about this talk. If you would like to ask me anything at all, just feel free to do that towards the end, right? So enough about myself. Let's go ahead and start talking about the topic at hand. So let's talk about visual art, right? And this is where I really regret not being more interactive and not standing in front of a live audience, right? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and mimic that experience as much as possible. Even though I don't have any webcam on my end right now, I'd invite people to unmute and just talk about what they think after this slide, right? So first of all, an overview of what we are going to do. So what is the role of visual art in a game? How does art fail or succeed in its role? Then we are going to have a checklist, and then towards the end we have a sort of a bonus section where we look for an Indian art style, right? So without further ado, let's move on to the next slide. So this is basically I'm going to be, rather than like letting you guess, I'm going to give you the first one. And what I want the audience to do is essentially translate this, or rather explain what I mean by this particular sentence, right? The first thing that we are looking at is the role of art in a game, right? So I am saying that the first role of art in a game is to introduce the game to its potential audience. So is there anybody who would like to shed some light on this? I just want to say that this is really more of a discussion. So if you can, even if you are not sure about what you feel about this, feel free to talk. This is not a test. This is not an, any kind of, you're not, this is a safe space to talk about this. This is exactly why we are having this conversation. So if you, any ideas you have, or any kind of interpretation you have for this is welcome. Just please feel free to unmute yourself and have a word.
So it's like providing a game for its target audience. Like for the kids, the theme will be cartoonic, and for RPG it will be like blood and gory, and like for action FPS it will be like more of an action packed. Like mainly most of the part will be physics dependent and all. So that's
Okay.
what
Okay.
yeah.
Can you also share your name when you?
Yeah. Sorry, my name is Samijit.
Okay. So you have partially covered what I'm trying to illustrate here.
Okay.
Anybody else? Please feel free to unmute and I can see a few familiar faces in the participants, and if I'm not going to get a lot of participation, I'm going to start unmuting them myself and getting them to talk. Yes, please go ahead. Anybody is welcome.
Hi, Aniruddha. This is Aditra at this end. I believe this is, like more about like the overall aspect, like starting from the sound design itself. Like, let's say if we talk about Farmville and like the way it is, targeted towards the audience, the sound is designed in such a way that it connects more towards that specific age group.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there.
Yeah.
You're on track. You got the hang of something, and now I'm going to pass it on to someone else. You're talking about the potential audience,
right?
So you got half of the concept there in both your answers. You're saying something really similar, and you got half the answer right there. Is there anybody? We'll wait for one more person to share, and then I can actually step into discuss what I mean by this sentence. Let's take one more opinion from the audience. Anybody? Any volunteers? Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think the potential audience is the one we are targeting to give out our game. Who will like our game?
That is exactly what we are looking for. That is exactly correct. But that and what Aritra was saying earlier is the composite and complete answer. So the first role of art in a game is to introduce it to people who are going to play it, not people who are already playing it. Think about it this way. If you are playing a game, then that either means you already downloaded it or you already bought it, right? You are now officially part of the game's audience. But imagine another friend seeing you play that game, or imagine you watching a trailer for the game on YouTube or Facebook or something like that. You haven't played the game yet. You haven't acquired the game yet. You're going to make that decision whether or not to acquire the game, whether or not to play that game, based on what you see. Primarily what you see. You're going to see a lot of things. You're going to look for a lot of things in the trailer. Does this have interesting characters for me? Does this have an interesting setting for me? Does this have the kind of polished visuals I'm looking for? Does this have any kind of unique aspects to it that I will not find in other games, and many other things like that? This does this have XYZ is different for every person. Some people will ask for more of a general rounded of experience in the trailer, whereas some people will say no, I want to see gameplay. I want to see only and only gameplay, and I don't want any commentary on it or anything like that. But the common thread in all of this is that first of all, they want to see what is going on. They will do that through, say, something like trailers. They will watch their friends play the game. They'll watch gameplay videos on YouTube, and they will read articles on the internet in which there might be screenshots or embedded videos. So now these days you can even find people more like being more interested in the game because of the memes or the gifs that we share from that game, right? That becomes a very uncontrolled mess of presentation. But the aspect that we have control over is the art that we create to achieve this. So when we are creating art for a game, we have to make sure that we are not only making it for the target audience. We are also supposed to be considering at least that other people are going to see it, and we want them to be interested. So we want to grow our audience to that. So that's what I mean by its potential audience, right? We want to target, or we want to sell the game to people who haven't bought it yet, who aren't already fans yet. And that's, I think, the first role of the game, for role of art in a game. And this is not limited to only 3D models and textures and illustrations. This is applicable across the board. This is applicable across any kind of art you have for the game. So that's why I'm not saying visual art specifically in this particular slide, right? Moving on to the next point, to establish a sense of progression. So again, this is where we go back to the audience and we get inputs, and then we can talk about what my particular view of this point is. So can anybody tell me how art is helping to establish a sense of progression? So there was this brief 1 second slide that everybody caught, I think, because I misclicked on my computer, but that could actually be a hint. So can anybody please feel free to unmute yourself. Can anybody tell us how art helps in establishing a sense of progression? I just want to say, if you're feeling a little bit shy or awkward to unmute and talk, then you can also put your views in the chat. I'll read them out, and then we can talk about those also. If you have any kind of any kind of opinion or any inputs, please feel free to either unmute yourself or put that in the chat.
Hey, Anirudh, Rhythm here. I'm audible?
Yes, Rhythm, you're audible.
Okay. So when it comes to sense of progression, art plays an important role. In most of the cases, I've seen these cases in level design mostly. We kind of give a hint, like we create a path, or let's say we add some props, or even if not props, color grading also comes into play. Sometimes we can
Okay.
hear a little bit of sound design on that.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of not a rebuttal, but I'm going to ask you a question based on this. Doesn't what you have described sound more like navigation?
Yeah, navigation.
So yeah, so this is a very easy thing to confuse, right? Moving around in a space need not be progression, right? So again, the mic is still open. If anybody else wants to
I would like to step in.
Yes.
Is this more
Can you
about
also
make?
just give your name name out as well?
Yeah, Aritra.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, this is also about making the player feel like they have a lot of choices in their hand. Like with art, you can definitely, like, this not only about like the 3D models or the animations I'm talking about, but how you present the entire UX to the player, like giving them more choices.
Okay, you have a sense of answer there, but again, isn't it more about then player choice or UX and customizability?
Right.
So again,
it's
how do
not
we,
the
how do we
overall
bring that
progression.
in? How do we bring that in?
Right.
Both of you have a point. I'm not saying this is untied to the sense of progression, but
So is sense of progression like um uh, uh giving the growth of the character like that?
okay,
Like
that's a very good point. That's a very good point.
like example.
Like if I talk about weapons, I mean, in a multiplayer game,
Uh-huh.
we get attachments, we get optics, and like, let's say a camo for the weapon or skin for the weapon. So
Oh,
things like that. I mean,
So
that
you
makes
have
the
half
kind
again.
of a
You have
reward.
half the answer over here. You
yeah,
have
what
about half the answer over here, right?
what I came to say is like if we're going like level by level, we are improving our we are growing. The character of the game is growing, so we have to show it in that style. Like the background also. If
Okay.
the first level,
Okay.
like
Who's this last person talking?
Raj Praveen.
Okay, hi, Saraj. So you are, I think, the closest to grasping what I mean here by progression. Let's twist this around and let's talk about it through different kinds of games. Do you think there is any kind of progression in a game like Tetris?
There is no progression, I think.
Isn't there?
There is. I think the appearance of the blocks changes, and the way you're, like when you're growing the towers. I mean,
So what is the one thing that you can okay, let's actually before like guessing it out, right? Let's try to
I mean, it somehow makes you feel like, I mean, it somehow makes you feel like you're leveling up.
all right.
We
That's
get
okay. That's a
increased
good aspect.
by time.
Hold on to that thought. Hold on to that leveling up thought. That's a good point. And I think that was also the point Raj was making when he said growth of the player. Correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So now let me put it another way. So do you think there is a sense of progression in a game like Uncharted or Last of Us?
Yes.
Yeah, the narrative.
Narrative. Okay. So can you then now see a little bit how art can tie into the sense of growth the player has, and the narrative also, right? So I'm going to now take it to the next slide because this will help me understand this a little bit better. So this is a progress example. What we have here is actually concept art from Blizzard. I don't own this, just for FYI. This is freely available on their website. So this is something I just downloaded to showcase here, right? What we are looking at is progression example through player character evolution. So when you take a look at this image, you can immediately tell which is the strongest player and which is the weakest player. Like, which is the weakest version of the player, or and the weakest, which is the strongest version of the player. You can see the character grow, or the character has acquired multiple pieces of gear as at different tiers, right? The player is progressing through these tiers. The player is progressing through these uh, levels, if you will. So you can see on the left hand side, we have the first, this is a demon hunter character. So the first demon hunter has, a very basic crossbow. It has, she has no armor. She's just wearing some leather shoes, a leather vest, a very torn scarf around her neck. So you can easily guess, yeah, this looks like a level 1 and enter the game demon hunter, right? And then you can safely assume that the second one could be something between levels 10 and 20, where she's got some gear, but she's still not like fully protected. She's still got that basic crossbow, but now she has a quiver so that she can carry around more arrows with her. And I'm kind of fantasizing about this a little bit. I'm not staying true to exactly how Diablo 2 works, but I'm just giving you an interpretation of what the progression will look like. And this is exactly what the concept artist's aim is to do also. So the second one that we see is like, she's got a few, gears, pieces of gear to protect her, right? The third one we can safely assume to be like, something around level 40, 45. She's got now a full set of gear, and she looks pretty formidable, right? She is like, fully armored. She's got now a cowl or a hood, if you will. She's got those great looking pauldrons on one side. She's got a bigger quiver, and she's probably got some kind of a mount to like, or like a some sort of a something that she can hook the crossbow on her back on her. She might have switched builds in between and moved to something other than crossbow. She's got a pouch to illustrate a bigger carrying capacity or whatever. And you can see all the gear is basically from a set, right? And lastly, we have like the top class end game demon hunter, who has again even better pauldrons, an even bigger crossbow, some additional doodads to help the. If you see, take a look at the fourth demon hunter's crossbow here. I don't know if my mouse cursor is visible, but if you take a look at the fourth demon hunter's crossbow and the attachment she has for holding it, you can see that it has like a stabilizing mechanism. She's got a big ass quiver at the back. She's got like a more badass looking scarf, a very help made from Diablo's horns and things like that. So it is very clear that this one is like the ultimate. This is like the strongest character, and one of the highest tiers you can achieve in terms of character evolution or character level progression, right? So this is one way you can use art to show how the player is progressing. You can keep different tiers of art for different tiers of player progression, which means that you also need to put in that much more effort in designing art for tiers like this. So this all boils down to one aspect. Progression is not going to happen necessarily linearly, but it's going to happen in a particular direction. And when we say it's going to happen in a direction, we are talking about it happening over some time. So the time is the main issue here. And what I mean by time is not like um, hours and minutes and seconds and days and things like that. It's not about how much time the player has spent playing the game. It's how much the player has progressed over that amount of time, how much change has the player gone through over that period of time. So that means you want to have art that correctly signifies or correctly represents the growth of the player over that amount of time. So you can have somebody playing, for 200 hours and never reach level 20 because they played that badly. Or you can have somebody who's played for only 5-6 hours and reach level 45, right? But nevertheless, what we are tying the progression or the artistic progression in this case is to the player's growth as a in terms of levels. Let's switch this back and talk about a narrative-based game because I mentioned Last of Us or Uncharted, right? That is more of a linear and linear narrative and progression. It's not 100% linear, so don't quote me on that. But what you're seeing is a story unfold, right? You're going to see different kinds of weather, different kinds of people growing up over a period of time, and things like that. Another good example of this is a game called Journey. If you haven't seen Journey, you should definitely go and check out uh, uh, the gameplay videos on YouTube. If you have a PS4, then you should definitely get this game and play through it just for this experience alone. So now what we are talking about is more of a strictly time limited or temporal progression, right? This temporal progression in Journey is one of the best examples of this. So you can also check out the talk that I mentioned here, The Art of Journey by the art director Matt Nava. It's available on YouTube. I'm unfortunately not able to link it here in the chat right now. But if you can look up, if you want to screenshot this and look up the talk by yourself and go through it, it's a great talk, and I think everybody who's dealing with art and video games should watch that talk at least. The point of this slide or that overall talk is that, and the point that we are trying to take out of it basically is that in Journey, based on what is the average color on your screen, you can tell at what stage of the game you are in, right? That means that based on the color hue that you have here on your screen, you will be able to tell how far along you're in the game. And this is not only time based either. You can see in the top half of this image that there is a silhouette of a landscape, and there is also different times of day. So when the journey happens, I'm not talking about the game journey, I'm talking about the journey of the character inside the journey. So when the journey happens, the character literally starts from the first region, and as they progress through different regions, they reach the last mountain top, right? Based on how far they are along, they are going to be at a different time of day. They are going to go ahead linearly in a single direction. So that means they have started off sometime in the afternoon, then they start moving towards the right. Then in the evening, they'll reach those ruins in the third column of the image. Then in the fourth column is they have this night setting. Then there is dawn, and in the morning they reach the mountain top. So there is a progression of time along with the progression of place. So this is what I think Rhythm was talking about first, where he pointed out a path. The path, the progress of the player on the path is represented or aided by the time that the player has spent in the game. And this time is a very loosely defined concept, because you can keep going forward or you can dawdle around in a place for quite some time. But this is essentially what I mean by temporal progression. You can tell how far along you are in the content, or for how far along you're in the story, based on the overall look in the game. So any other examples if from the audience for this kind of temporal progression? You can put them in the chat. You can unmute and talk to all of us. Either way. So we did get a few examples in there. So we have Dilip Arjun who's saying experience points. Again, that's a good good tool to show progression. The experience points are not exactly art. And then we say level up. Meeting stronger players, the more you level up. Okay. Again, that's a gameplay decision, or rather a game design decision. We are not exactly, but it will tie into the art because of the. If we go back to the previous slide, if this player meets this player, the first player meets the fourth player. The first player knows that the fourth player is further along in the game. So again, it is signifying player progression, and it is communicating player progression. Right? Anybody else who wants to unmute and like offer a few more views here? It's open. This is not me, giving a lecture. This is us talking about this. So feel free to unmute and talk about this. Any views or any other examples you have in mind. So Aritra is saying in Inside or Limbo, we can fall. Can they fall under temporal progression? Yes, they certainly can. Many platformers actually do have this sense of progression because of the way the platform is designed. They are going in one particular direction. Generally, you're going left or right, and that can actually have a great impact on how far along you think you're in the game. Tier levels, yes, tier levels are what we talked about in the previous slide. You can have tier 1, tier 2, tier on 100 or things like that. I'm going to put a question to the audience, and I think this is going to rile up a lot of people. How do you see player progression in a game like a battle royale? For example, something like PUBG or Fortnite. And I'm sure this is going to elicit a few responses. So we have Raj Praveen ji saying the Raji game. Yes, Raji follows a very linear narrative, and you have cutscenes in between to show different points of the story. You are also seeing it's not a great example of linear progression through set pieces, but you have very detailed set pieces that tell a story, even if it's not like a linearly progressive story like that. So Raji is also a decent example of this. Yes. So coming back to my question.
Yeah.
So
Anirudh,
how do we see progression in progressive art in something like a battle royale game like PUBG or Fortnite?
Aritra here. So in Battle Royale, I think there are two kinds of progressions. One is with definitely the gameplay experience, where like the shortage, like as you're playing and the time gets shorter, the entire scenario requires you to be more stronger than the other opponents. So that is one time-bound progression when you're playing the game, and then you definitely earn attachments with tire levels, or let's say your ranks, as you keep defeating, or
Okay.
as you
Okay.
keep
So
your winning streaks.
the
Zone-
key
zone-
takeout here from your point is ranks.
For
Yeah.
every zone shrink, the level may change. The
Again, isn't that coming to the same point? Again, your rank, right?
not the rank. If like we are playing in a game like 100 people in a battleground, so
Mhm.
like the zone shrinks, right?
Exactly. That was what I was looking for. So in
For
Yes,
every zone
PUBG,
shrink,
you are seeing the zone shrink. That is a sense of progression, even if it's over just over like something over 20 minutes.
and also the
Right.
red zone.
Right.
You can see
I was saying like there are two kinds of progression here. So the first one being like you're like the scenario requires you to be more stronger as the time shrinks down or the zone shrinks down.
Does it though? In a battle royale, does it really need you to be stronger, or does it just mean that you have to
I mean, you're more
have more ammo
vulnerable.
or more armor than the rest of the guys?
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
even though if you have more armor and bullets
if
than
you
enemies,
if you
you're
suck at the
out
game, you're
of
still
zone.
going to like
Yeah,
end up
then
in the So
I
so
think
what
more
we are
armor-
trying to say here, is that there might not be just one kind of progression, right? This is not strictly a progression of time or a progression of tiers. This is also a progression in. You can also introduce progression in gameplay, which can be then supported by that. So in a game like PUBG, the circle closing game, or I think what was that game that
The
Ubisoft
blue
put?
ring.
No. What was the battle royale that Ubisoft just put it? Hyperscape.
Hyperscape.
So in Hyperscape, the world outside the circle is essentially destroyed and it disintegrates, right? So that immense like that threat that is there, that is closing in on you, that can be represented by art. For example, let me give you another example of this. In a real-time strategy game, say like not World of it's like Warcraft or something like Starcraft or like Age of Empires or anything like that, Commandos or something like that. You are put on a map, right? And the map is basically dark all around you. And when you start moving your units around, they discover parts of the map. Isn't that also a kind of progression? Because that is going to show you how much of the map you have explored, right? Sukrut is asking, how does zones shrinking have an art aspect? So the zone shrinking could be, just a simple program, right? It basically could be just a mechanic that anything outside of this zone is, uh, losing, going to lose life over time, or like is going to insta death, or something like that. What we have as an art role over here is to properly visualize that, or to properly communicate that. If, for example, if you don't have a convincing visual outside of the zone shrinking that you are losing health, and if you don't communicate that properly to the player, they are not going to realize it, or they are not going to take it seriously, right? There are always going to be players who will not take your game mechanics seriously. So if you don't create a sense of urgency through your presentation of the zone shrinking and what is outside the zone, when you have a zone, that means you have an inside and outside, and you need to have a different things, uh, different visual effects or different visual cues to signify what is going on in and out, right? We have Abner Benjamin saying exploration like in Far Cry, Genshin Impact. Yes, that is also a great example. In Fortnite, Soham is saying there is a storm outside the zone which has a specific art style. That is correct. That is exactly what I'm looking at. Coming back to what I was saying about RTS, so even the exploration of a map throughout the dark areas is a kind of progression. One last example before we move on to the next topic, that is Minecraft. In Minecraft, you can keep digging. Aritra is also talking about Minecraft.
Yeah. Just
we think very much alike. So in Minecraft, the whole world is random, right? But you can tell how deep you are in a tunnel that you've dug based on what kind of stone you have around you. Like that at the bottom there is going to be lava, in middle there is going to be stones somewhere, then you might or might not find diamonds, and you have different biomes across the whole thing, and things like that. So there is also a progression in sense of the placing the player, or the player being able to guess where they are in that game world, in that and this is largely in that Minecraft seed, and this is largely determined by the player with the visual cues. Obviously there's going to be other kinds of art like audio cues. You're going to have like a more echoing and reverbing sound effect ambient in the ground chambers, whereas uh, you have more of a open sky, birds and wind kind of effect outside in the exterior, and things like that. And when you go high up in the sky, you're going to hear very bright wind sounds and no birds and things like that, right? So there's going to be a lot of kinds of progression that you can signify through art. Let's move on to the next slide in the interest of time. So now, what is the next role? To influence or guide the player's decisions in the game. So I actually don't mean we don't need to go back to discuss this, because the first answer we got was actually in the line of this. To influence to influence the player in the game itself is the most obvious role of art. So you want to the simplest thing you can describe this is with something like traffic signals. Everybody knows green means go, red means stop, yellow means be careful, right? these are very, very obvious visual cues, and we can use these, this innate understanding of visuals that we have. We can definitely, say that everybody has this inner understanding of certain visual cues, certain shapes, and things like that, and we can use those to influence and guide the player in our game or across the game, right? So yes, Sukrut is saying better looking weapons on MMORPGs. So yes, you're going to want to use the better looking weapon. For example, icons on minimap. That is correct. Uh, One more thing is, this. Let's break down this frame from Diablo 3 again. I'm using Diablo 3 as an example because uh, from an art perspective, it's a pretty consummate game. It's a very polished game. It's not the best Diablo game, but it's also not a bad game at all. It's a very good, it's a very well executed game in terms of uh, visual art, right? So you can see that there is a very clear cut distinction in dark and light when it comes to Diablo. You can immediately make out where the level entrance is, which is where you came from. But the level entrance and the waypoint have a different purpose, and as such, they have very different visual cues. The level entrance is, kind of abstract. It makes sure to mask the actual entrance, which doesn't really exist in the game. You're just basically exiting from room and entering another, right? So there is no real door there, but it's doing a good job of showing where you came from, and the area beyond that point is kind of undefined or something like that. And the waypoint is more of a teleport to your home location, and that needs to look like a little bit more snatched up, because if the player hasn't discovered it yet, they need to be drawn to it immediately because it's a high priority unlock. Like they need to go to the player needs to go to the waypoint and activate it immediately, ideally. Again, we have icons for both on the minimap as well as an icon for the player, right? uh, Here we have a completely dark area. That means it's not exploded, so we don't know what there is in that area. We could just walk there and it could be a hidden door. It could be another pack of monsters. It could be some sort of a wall or something like that. It's all in the dark, so it's all. I think all of this is like putting together the examples that we were talking about earlier in one thing. And over here we have just another door, so that means that if you walk through this, there's going to be another room and things like that. Notice also how light plays a part in all of this, right? Doors have, the doors that you are supposed to discover easily have some sort of torches on them, like that they are immediately drawn. They draw our attention immediately when we notice them on the screen, right? And that is, the player is going to inadvertently or subconsciously chart a path through these doors, even if we had a ton of things in between. We are seeing an artist's decision being randomized, and where these two doors are put in front of each other. They will not be there in every single game, right? But an artist decided to put a door there and put lights on the door so that it's immediately noticeable. What this is going to do is, whenever we see two doors, we are going to imagine the line between those two doors. We are going to imagine, okay, this is where I came from. This is where I have to go. It won't occur to us very easily that might not be ideal in a game situation, right? If we have more than one door, more than two doors, then it becomes a problem of choice. Okay, where am I supposed to go? Then you're going to immediately go on the internet and say, okay, there are these two doors. I came from this one. Now, which of the other two do I select, and things like that. You start immediately going through walkthroughs and things like that. So, but if there was a bigger door and a smaller door, or a more ornate door and a more simple door, then you would say, okay, the ornate door seems more important. I'll do that later. Let me finish the quest first. Let me finish this area first. Let me go to the smaller door, which might be just a room, right? So it's decisions like this in the art that can really influence the way the player thinks. So for in role-playing games, for example, this is going to be a really big deal. you can tell what the players needs to prioritize in order to progress or in order to finish their objective. You can influence uh, which uh, which object the player will click more easily, which object will be uh, will give more satisfaction to the player through what comes next. You can chart out paths. So for example, if you show some sort of a edge of a cliff, and the player is immediately going to say, okay, I'm probably not going to go there, and I'll fall and die. But if you show a path leading towards the edge of the cliff and then something like a hidden bridge, that's another artistic decision that is going to influence the player and give them a sense of discovery, right? This is especially true when you want to hide secret areas in your game, or make any kind of secret achievements available, or items available, or something like that. So to influence the players' decisions and the way they interact with the game world, we can make use of obvious art cues. So if you want to like you know understand this topic in detail, because this is a very big topic in itself, you can just start looking up on visual cues and the psychological aspects of visual cues. Like we can there is a very famous uh, psychological study, I guess. I am not sure where I read it and what it's called, but it just says that every shape that we see gives us a sense of a particular emotion, right? So that means triangles look sharp, so they look dangerous. Road signs are like that's why a lot of the road signs are triangle shaped. Uh, uh, a block sign or a square sign looks stable and more friendly and solid. So it is something that we use to create, put in a lot of generic information. Circles are more I think it was more fluid, and they will be you will be drawn to them also, just not as much as triangles. So that's also why you will see a lot of signs being made into circles. And the same goes for colors. Like, you're going to find a few colors pleasing, you're going to find a few colors dangerous. Like, you're going to associate red with danger, you're going to associate green with safety, and other things like that. And similarly, red with warmth and blue with cold and things like that. You can see that also is being played out in this frame particularly quite nicely, right? One last thing I want to note before moving on from this slide is you can see a very subtle addition to the visual cue. That is, the player you see here is looking down, and the minimap icon of the player has also gotten a small arrow that looks in the same direction as the player, so that we can also tell where the player is facing. I think that's a very subtle addition, but it goes a long way in making your game more communicative and more understanding, right? And then finally, all of this together is going to help us create a thematically consistent, a more immersive and memorable experience for players. So a great example of this, and I'm it has kind of hasn't aged well, but a great example of this is actually Witcher 3. So the Witcher 3 is a great example because it packs all of the previous 3 points together. It has really impressive graphics, right? It has a good sense of progression in terms of your Witcher gear and your abilities. Your abilities progressively get stronger as you play through the game and acquire more skill points. The areas you access progressively get more interesting as you go on, right? You start off with this, and I'm talking more on the lines of story, but since it's an open world game, you can play however you want. But how far along you are in the story will unlock more areas for you in any case anyway. So again, Witcher 3 does this very nicely. It does, have more things like to influence the guide the player's decisions in terms of it's littered with quest markers. It's littered with objective markers. When you open up the menu, there's going to be so much, and that is the deliberate decision to fill the game to contents with content so much that they will spend more time playing the game and put the main story off for something. If they wanted the player to focus on the main storyline, they wouldn't have put as many markers in there. What they would have done is just walk the player through the main story and then say, okay, now you finish the main story. Here is all the extra content you can play. It doesn't do that. As soon as you drop into the world, you're going to have like 100 markers on your map, and you're going to want to explore each and every one of them, because all of them are going to give you more content, might be giving you extra items, might be giving you just more story, might be giving you some hidden aspect of the story or something like that. Not only is it limited to all 3 points, but it also provides a very thematically consistent uh, representation of the Witcher novels also. So it is staying true to the Polish setting that the game has, where it's basically you against the world, and world is not a very nice place, kind of thing. And it's making sure that there are like cues for Polish people that they will immediately pick up on, like the clothes or the kind of things that people are doing in the scene, the animals, the terrain, and everything. So for people who are already familiar with this kind of setting, they are going to be immediately drawn to it. But at the same time, it is done in such a high quality and a very careful attention to aesthetics that the people who have no idea of what this is all about are still going to be interested, because it all looks very, very good. It looks very, very impressive, right? So a lot of people will be like, oh, this game looks very nice, let me play it. And then they'll also discover all these other good things about the game, and go ahead and like the game themselves. It's interesting, and I said it hasn't aged well because immediately after this, we got kind of an unfinished game from CD Projekt Red, which was Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk also delivers very highly on art. It's a shame that the technical issues plague the game so much that the excellent art direction in Cyberpunk was kind of sidelined, and which is why also I'm not using examples from that game. But The Witcher 3, if you haven't played, you should. And it's a great example of how to execute a vast game and how to treat art right in a game like that, right? Uh, Sorry. So how does art fail or succeed? So now this is all our discussion from before is actually giving us a very clear understanding now. Number one, art will not be able to cover up core flaws in your design or your systems or your gameplay or your story. If your story is bland, no amount of dramatic visuals is going to make it better. It's not going to help, simply. You cannot tell a very simple and bland story where there is no character tension, there is no character drama, when there are no interesting characters to begin with. You cannot make that look, just shiny and pretty and, badass, and just expect it to, work. The more detail you put into art, if that is not supported by the story, it's going to basically fall on its face. It's not going to work out. And there are multiple examples of this. The same goes for gameplay. You cannot have very shiny looking art running at 10 frames per second, right? You cannot have, something like, a very ornate and multi-component door in your game open like it's just two flat objects, right? So there are things like this that you need to pay attention to. You just making something look pretty on the surface is not going to help it. You cannot have, for example, systems that demand a lot of things, and then art that don't support them, right? So if you're talking about like making a car engine simulator or something like that, you need to have like in order to make a proper simulator, you need to make it look like a car and then also make it behave like a car engine, right? So that means your components need to be realistic. They need to be fitting in a certain way. Their movements and animation and the any kind of grease they have on or any smoke they produce, any lights that blink, all of these needs to be believable. I'm not saying realistic, I'm saying believable. And they should be at the very least plausible. This happens a lot when people try to, make very, very highly photorealistic characters for the games. If the performance for that character is not good enough, if the rig driving that character is not good enough, or if the lighting on the character is not good enough, it doesn't matter how much detail there is on that character's topology, or in the character mesh, or how many hair you have on that character's head. If none of that is gelling together with the rest of that, then you're not going to have a pleasant character experience. And this is a very, very common pitfall for artists, that they just put in detail to cover up for other flaws, and that doesn't usually work. What we want to go for is a more balanced and homogeneous experience, right? The next is, it fails when it doesn't fulfill one of its roles properly. The roles of art being these: if it's not doing one of these things, then it's going to fail on that front. It needs to introduce the game to its potential audience. It needs to have a sense of progression based on whatever kind of progression you're looking at. We cannot have the same kind of gear for top end and bottom end. For example, we cannot have the same kind of artwork or set piece for start of game and end of game and things like that. It needs to effectively influence the guide or misguide the player deliberately if you want. And it needs to be thematically consistent. It needs to be immersive, and that is what is going to make it memorable. So it fails when it doesn't do one of these rules properly, right? It should be optimized for performance at all times. This is very, very important, and this is where I think our artist community in India especially kind of falls short. uh, it ties in with the first point on this slide also quite well. When we put in too much detail, more detail than we need, then we are going to be essentially 99% of the times we're going to be losing out on performance. So what that means essentially is, and I'm sorry if this feels a little bit more pointed, if you're coming from animation into games, you need to optimize your game models, and that doesn't mean making them low poly. You need to optimize them, not minimize them. You need to make them work better to the best of their capacity, or to the best of the capacity that is permitted by your game. It needs to be optimized for as much performance as possible, not even maximum, the fastest you can get. Your game team is generally going to have some kind of a polygon budget. It's going to have a frame per second target, and you want to optimize your art towards that. So that means if your programmer is telling you this model is too high poly for me, they're probably not lying. You need to optimize your art first, and even if after that the model is not performing very well, then the programmer needs to evaluate if their code is wrong. But it is a very high likelihood that because of extra detail that we put in our artwork, it is suffering on performance. And this is something that I've validated across my career in every industry that I've worked in. Detail does not you know uh, detail does not cover up flaws, and detail obviously hits performance whenever we bring it into games. That includes texture sizes, that includes the resolution, that includes running 4K textures on a 1080p screen, that includes something like running a million triangle mesh on a mobile phone, or things like that. And there are multiple considerations, and artists also need to be aware of these things. And since this is all a very iterative process, we need to start working on art as soon as we can in our project. That means if you have a team of if you're a game developer studio, for example, what you want to do is bring in your artist friends as soon as you can in your project. Don't wait on creating some sort of prototype with just blocks and circles and spheres and rectangles and things like that. Don't wait to do that. Use some kind of prototype art. Use programmer art, but don't just stick to if you just want to have a simple object moving around test, then using a cube is fine. But you cannot exactly treat something like a character walking on a surface you cannot exactly mimic that with a cube or capsule, right? Bring in your artist friends, involve them in the process. There is a good chance they are going to have inputs about what looks good and what looks bad, and how it should look, how it should not look. If you're doing your lighting correctly, if you're doing your texturing correctly, all of these things. We need to start involving artists as early as possible, if not from the start of the project itself. And then from that point onwards, art should not be an afterthought. It should not be like, let me finish the mechanics first and then I'll skin it with some art or things like that. That is a very terrible approach to make games. We want to have artists' opinions and contributions from as soon as we can, from as early as we can. The reason for that is because art is also a very iterative process. The artist is a lot of times not doing just the technical execution of a task. They are also working to creatively come up with solutions to the problems that are given to them. Like if you ask them, okay, give me a valley 3D environment. Now that is a single sentence, but that can mean something like 3 weeks of work for a 3D artist, right? It can be very iterative. They can they might need to come up with 10 different options for the valley environment before you choose one of them. So imagine being in the artist's shoes, and if you are already an artist, you need to be upfront about this. You need to say, okay, this is going to take time. I cannot deliver this in XYZ date. You need to be sure that your timelines are realistic and they are deliverable. If you are getting the kind of timelines from your team members that are not realistic, be upfront about it. Talk about it and tell them. Art is a very iterative process. More than creative, it is iterative because you're going to make several versions. You're going to keep working on it, something, and polish it until it becomes ready for everybody. And it should start as early as possible, if not at the start itself. If you want to, even before you are starting writing programs, you can start with concept art. That's also going to give you ideas about designing systems. That's going to give you ideas about designing gameplay. And there is really no limit to how soon you can start with art. So in order to do that, and this part is I'm just going to skim through. You can, if you want, you can take screenshots of this. I believe we are also going to share the recording later, but if you would like to take screenshot of these slides, please feel free to do that. So I have put together what I call the art reference checklist, right? It's a very simple thing, and we'll see examples as we go on. First of all, we have the reference material. We need to have descriptive write-ups, sketches or doodles with well-written notes, and technical details and requirements, and other reference material. Now, let me explain all of these, briefly. So, reference material is like things like images or blueprints or photographs of real objects. It could be places, people. It could be monuments. It could be paintings from hundreds of years ago. It could be cave paintings. It could be photogrammetry models and things like that. And this should be our reference material. You should always base this on any kind of pre-existing art you have, because it's not copying if you don't if you work on it and come up with your own, right? We are looking at it for reference, we are not looking at it to trace it out. So that means unless you have a good understanding of what rocks look like, you're not going to be able to create an imaginary rock, right? Unless you know what people look like, you're not going to be able to draw a very convincing person. You could maybe just go ahead and draw a circle with 2 dots and a smile, but that's not a convincing person. That's a smiley face, right? In order to draw a realistic face, you need to know what people look like and how to draw that. So look at pictures, right? The reason is that all of these provide very useful reference for at least one or two aspects that they are concerned with. So if you, for example, if you were talking about the Valley project from before, the Valley 3D environment. You need to look at real valleys and see why and how they are formed. It's because of water running through on a plain for hundreds and thousands and millions of years that you see a valley being created, right? So there's going to be corrosion, there's going to be, you know, different layers of the earth being exposed and things like that. So these things are apparent after we take reference. Again, we can't draw two triangles for mountains and then draw a, uh, two wiggly lines to create a river and call it a valley. And that is again what a lot of times that is what we are doing even in games that are shipping, right? These assets are mostly created based on life, real life objects. So any amount of reference photographs you are going to get are always welcome. They artists will always welcome reference material because it saves them, you know, thinking time. It saves them, you know, guessing time, and it's always helpful for artists. As much reference material you can provide for them. Alongside that, you need to give write-ups. So you will notice that I am talking about something like a write-up in Talk About Art, but that is important because it gives information about what cannot be very easily referenced with real life, right? If you want to have something like a teleportation glow that you have in mind, there is no real life example of this, right? But you can describe it in your words, and then the artist can work on it and figure out what is the best way to show it, right? It is the easiest way to communicate your ideas to the artist by being as descriptive as possible when you give them an idea. And the best way to do that is basically write it down on a piece of paper or a Google Doc and share it with them. Add to it, keep adding to it, let them know when you uploaded it. This should provide, like, you know, important details mainly. You don't want to write hundreds of words that mean the same thing. The trick here is to be concise and, you know, provide important information like history or backstory, abilities, and this should not be very specific towards what needs to come out. Like, for example, you can make a demand like, uh, make it blue is a fairly acceptable demand, but make it this particular shade of blue that is the sky when it's 3 p.m. in the afternoon and things like that. Don't do that, things like that. Let the artist be a little bit more creative about it. Give them some time to think about it and come up with something. There are chances they might be able to come up with something better, right? And at the same time, it should not be too vague or lacking in detail. Coming back to my previous example, make me a 3D valley environment is too vague. You have to tell what kind of valley. Is it well vegetated? Is it dry or arid? Is it a desert? Is it some sort of snow valley or what? You need to give some specific ideas. Not too much and not too less. That is what we mean by descriptive write-up. Then any kind of sketches or doodles also are a great addition. Even if you are not an artist yourself, you should be able to draw at least stick figures. You should be able to draw arrows, like the our friend who was drawing on our screen earlier here. You should be able, if you can do that much, you can give some doodles or sketches to your artist, and those are also going to be very helpful for them. They can communicate certain concepts very efficiently and effectively, such as, like, you know, how big one object is in relation to another, or how deep something is, or how, you know, far something is, or things like that, right? These doodles can be really simple. You don't need to be, you don't need to have a commercial art degree to do that. They are just to be used for pointers. This is very useful for artists, trust me. And this is not an artist, but it will still help any artist a lot. If you're a programmer, please make sure to give your artist some kind of, you know, doodles or, like, you know, little drawings on anything you give them. That will actually help them understand your concepts and your ideas a lot more, and they'll be able to respond in kind with, you know, a better version of that, and you will have better communication overall within your team. So this is a good example of what that looks like. Uh, so this is again from Blizzard. We have a orc chieftain, I think. Oh no, it's Rexxar. Rexxar is a character from Heroes of the Storm and Warcraft 3. It's a half ogre, half orc kind of guy. So you have a character sheet over here, which is like, not a very detailed drawing, but a very, clear drawing as to the overall silhouettes, the shapes he has, the kind of backstory it can tell. He's got animal skulls all over him, so you can probably guess he's got something to do with animals. He's also covered in fur that emphasizes that. Every little component is labeled with an arrow, right? So this is done by an artist, but you can still do it if you're not, you know, uh, a very skilled artist, by just drawing stick figures and, like, putting a cap and pointing towards it and saying cap, RB cap, helmet, or something like that. Then lastly, there are the technical details and requirements, and this is more targeted towards the artist. So the artists also need to be aware of details that are relevant to the final game object that is going to be used in the game. So that includes things like texture resolution, polygon count, any mesh specific details like, uh, topology and things like that. Or you need to be aware of how blend shapes are going to mix together, how well written your shaders are, or how well designed your shaders are, how smooth and fluid your animations are, if your placement and hierarchy of, multiple objects is desirable in the game or not, levels of detail models, so something that is to be rendered from far away versus something that's rendered closer, whether it's actually all acceptable to the physics system if it's required, and things like that. So your artists need to be aware of these things, and these are very important in distributing details, right? So distributing details across game asset means, like, if you're building uh, an open world game, but only a certain part of that world is playable, right? But you want to show buildings beyond that area. If you're going to have those buildings never come real close to the player, you don't need to spend too much time detailing them. You can just maybe take a photograph, stick it on the plane, and be done with it, right? And that should be enough, right? So this is what I mean by distribution of details efficiently across game assets. Figure out what is high priority, figure out what is low priority, try to figure out what the player is going to see up close and what the player is never going to see up close, and things like that. One thing you can note is, like, the apparent size of a texture on the scene and versus the actual size of a texture. If you're going to create some sort of a road sign, and that's never going to be close to the camera, you probably don't need a 2K texture for it. You can probably get away with 512 by 512. If it's like a top-down game, you probably don't need 2K or 4K textures for anything. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about here. And the other reference material is like anything that doesn't belong to these categories. So that includes things like comics, stories, books, movies, TV series, and this is largely to discuss ideas, experiences, and what everyone, just to get everybody on the same page, right? This is useful more towards the early parts of your project. Don't do that. Don't bring in something you like from a TV show in the middle of production. It's easier to, like, take inspiration from all of these things and then come up with an idea of your own and then stick to it, and then try to integrate only the things that that are uh, that are relevant or that are gelling well together. Don't try to force anything in way after you started production. This material could be avoided, like I said, because if unless they have, like, specifically reference for something as describing category 1, like this category, reference material category, right? And so bonus is Roy, can we go 5 or 10 minutes extra?
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Okay, I'm sorry about taking over time, but I think we should be done in just 10 minutes. So
Sure,
looking
sure.
for an Indian time, Indian style. I hate to break the bubble, but there isn't one. There is no specific Indian style, and if somebody thinks there is, I'm going to say there shouldn't be, right? what we want to do is we want to find inspiration and innovation in our like vast cultural diversity and history, right? And we have to avoid generification. So generification is basically kind of a made up word, I think. Generification means we don't want to make it too generic, meaning we don't want India to be represented by a certain kind of typical stereotypical visual, right? So let's just take a look at temples across India. Can anybody tell me what the first temple is?
What? I didn't understand the question. What's it?
So can you guess where these temples are from?
One is Sun Temple, I guess.
You don't need to name the exact temple.
Somewhere from south.
Yes, somewhere from somewhere. So let me just give you this right hand two side temples are in Maharashtra, and the left hand side temple is in South India. I'm pretty sure it's the Sun Temple, like you said. So the top right temple is actually in my city. It's about 2 kilometers from where I live. It's called the Pataleshwar Sun. It's a temple for. It used to be a temple for Shiva, right? And what you're seeing is the Nandi Dome. It is not built like anything else you will see in South or North India. And like I said, we are not aware of the vast architectural diversity we have in in buildings, right? These are just 3 temples, right? Let's move on to the other slide. Okay, these are forts across India. Can you tell me which fort is from which state? You can probably tell the second one, top right again.
That one seems from Rajasthan.
Yeah. What about the one on the left? Anybody know?
Somewhere from Maharashtra.
Yeah, that is from.
I think that's Pratapgarh.
It is Pratapgarh. You're absolutely right. And what about bottom right? Okay, never mind. It doesn't matter where it's from. What I'm trying to illustrate is different geographies over here, right? One is a temple on top of a hill. One is a fort on top of a hill. It's really high that it touches the clouds and that kind of high. One is a fort in a desert, and one is a fort like flat on the ground. It's more like a castle, right? We have this kind of diversity. Do we really see that in our games? Do we really see that in our movies? When we see an interior set for a fort or a castle, it's all the same in all our TV shows, on our games and everything like that. It doesn't look identifiable. It doesn't look, belonging or grounded in a certain geographical region. And that is a concern, because that is something that we need to address as a community by diversifying the presentation we have of our art. Raji does do this to an extent, but Raji is more of a creative experiment in the sense that it's not sticking to only Indian culture. They have their enemies in their game are more brought in from Polynesian culture. Not Polynesian, I'm sorry. More East Asian culture, Southeast Asian cultures, right? So, but the core architecture in Raji is very, very clearly, centered around areas like MP and Rajasthan. It kind of doesn't go really great with in my opinion, and this is like maybe just a personal thing, but that kind of architecture suits better and is designed for a more desert-like scenario, whereas Raji, you have a lot of rain and things like that going on. So it is a little jarring to me, but it's still nonetheless a very great creative execution that steps away from this traditional presentation of Indian art, right? Lastly, we have just like farmers across India, right? There is one thing I want to point out here. Can look at the right hand side 2 pictures, one at the bottom and one at the top, right? Can you point out the biggest difference in those two? And can you first of all tell me where those are from? These are both from India. Can you tell me where those are from?
Bottom one is from
One is
Northeast.
from Tamil Nadu.
Top one is from Tamil Nadu. Bottom one is from
Northeast.
Okay, Northeast. You can say Tamil Nadu with confidence, but we cannot say which state in the Northeast with confidence, isn't it? So the bottom one is from Assam, right?
Oh,
Can you point out the biggest difference in those two? Both of them are farmers doing like irrigation.
yeah.
What is the main difference? We have different sized animals when we go across India, right? And the poor guy on the left doesn't have any cows, right? Because it's very difficult to sustain cows like that. That is a picture from Gujarat. Sorry, not Gujarat, Rajasthan, right? You can't exactly have cows there. He's going to have a different animal for herding, right? Both on the right hand side, both of them are rice plantations. Both of them are like from there are deliberate selection because they are both doing the same thing from the same angle. But it is so obvious to miss. It's so easy to miss this obvious distinction that the cows in the northeast are smaller. The cattle in the northeast, the animals in the northeast are smaller than what they are in south of India, right? In South India, even in Maharashtra, we have like this competition where we bring in the biggest bull and we have these kind of competition in the villages. That doesn't exist. You can see the cows in the second picture are barely as tall as not even as tall as the guy who's doing it, right? As the farmer, they are barely over his waistline high, whereas the cows in the first picture are as tall as that guy. If they start standing straight, they will be as tall as that guy, whereas these are fairly smaller. And this is what I mean that by having reference available, you cannot pull up like a story in Assam and show like a giant ass cow showing doing irrigation and things like that. It needs to be consistent. It needs to be believable for those people. It needs to be we need to take actual reference from those people, right? So this is actually the end of my presentation. I hope towards the last 3 slides with the bonus section, I was able to give you some food for thought and point out something more that we can do in terms of improving the art quality from India. Thank you. What you can see on the screen is my email and my Twitter, Instagram handles. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to engage with the community. Always happy to answer your questions as much as my schedule allows. If you want to spend another 5 minutes till 12:45 to take any direct questions, I'll be happy to do that. Roy.
Thanks, Aniruddha. That's a great session for all the artists here. And any questions from the group? We have some time left.
It doesn't have to be about this session. It can be about anything. You can.
Yes, you can even ask any questions regarding Unity, as he's from Unity as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think there are some questions in the chat. So what are guidelines for Indian style? So I think I'll go back and say there is not one Indian style. You want to decide a style from India that you want to draw in. You want to draw it South Indian, you want to draw it North Indian, Northeast. Every state actually can have their own style. You should be making that decision. And then after you made that decision, only you're going to find the right reference. Because right now, if you go to Google and start searching Indian style temple, then you're going to see such a variety of temples that you're not going to be able to make a decision that this is Indian style. And we really don't want like a Western representation of Indian style, right? So it will be very generic, and then people will start talking with an Indian accent kind of thing. So just don't do that. Like, decide what kind of culture you want to show, and then you can find the right kind of style for that. Any other questions? Once again, I'd like to thank you all for being here, for sitting through this very long and kind of delayed session. And thank you to IMSK for having me on and giving me the opportunity to talk about this. If you were expecting a more Unity flavored session, then I'm sorry I wasn't. That is not what I was doing. But yeah, I think this was also an important topic to discuss and something that I would like to discuss every time I get the opportunity to.
Thank you, everyone. We have more interesting sessions from IMSK. Please leave your feedback. I have left the feedback form on the chat. You can leave their feedback, and please keep supporting us on our Discord, Telegram, and Facebook channels. We have some few exclusive workshop topics that are planned in the coming weeks, and I hope you guys like that one as well. So thank you guys. Thank you everyone.